my distinct pleasure to introduce Nigel Jacob today, to introduce Nashville to Nigel and Nigel to Nashville. This is his first trip here, so I'm excited about that. As it says in the bio, Nigel is the co-founder of the Office of Urban Mechanics in Boston. And the Office of Urban Mechanics is the old wise man of offices of innovation or similar offices at 5 years old. Innovation offices in cities are a new being, and the Office of Urban Mechanics, why it has a different name, is really an inspiration around the country for the offices that we have begun. Recently, he went to spend a lot of his working days at the Living Cities Collaborative. Living Cities is a collaboration of 22 of the nation's largest foundations and funders. Living Cities particularly works on supporting innovative practices in cities, particularly in reducing barriers and increasing opportunities for low-income citizens is their focus. So really a focus on poverty. And as part of that work, he is doing the City Accelerator program, which I'm proud to say Nashville is a part of the first cohort, along with Louisville and Philadelphia. And the City Accelerator is in itself is an innovation. It's a cohort model of cities coming together to work on shared challenges and to share our resources and ideas, working alongside of one another, asking each other questions, offering support, coming to greater wisdom together. And Nigel's vision is always one of collaboration. That is what he's going to talk about today in terms of his work in Boston.
We have a crumbling infrastructure in our cities that we don't know how to pay for. We don't know how to resource the uplifting of. And increasingly, climate change is at our front doors, and we need to. There's a lot of stuff that we need to be doing there, mitigating, sort of rethinking policies, a whole range of different things. So the challenge here is that clearly there is a role. So what I'm going to talk about is sort of going to be from the perspective of government, right? So and I'm still a government employee, so I am still part-time co-chair of New Mechanics, but I'll be talking about our attempts at collaboration in a variety of different contexts from that perspective. So the idea here, I think, there's some lessons to be learned about how big institutions can think differently and can think out of the box. And so, in order for government to have play any part in any of this, it's clear that we can't do it alone, right? The budgets aren't big enough, the skills aren't there, the ways of working and thinking aren't all there. I mean, there's bits and pieces, but there's a lot that needs to be done. And so when we were putting together this group of New York Mechanics, the question for us was, what do we do and how should it work? And it was pretty clear that a collaborative-driven model would be the way to go. You know, again, because there was two of us for the longest time, we couldn't do it all ourselves, and so doing everything with partners was the road that we went down, and I think it's a pretty good effect. So here's the theoretical framework. So this will be my one theory slide for you today, and I'll be testing you afterwards. This is the New York Mechanics pipeline, right? So the theory here is that on the left, the intake funnel, you know, a city like Boston, like Nashville, like Kansas City, like Hackensack, is filled with potential innovators. Innovators inside of government, people outside of government, people in different community anchor institutions, people that are trying to take on the issues that their city face. The challenge is that, you know, if you go back maybe 10 years ago, we used to talk, I guess we do, but we used to talk a lot more about social entrepreneurs and sort of social ventures, and again, they are a key part of the ecosystem. But I think one of the things that we've learned over the last several years is that if all you're doing is done, if you as a social venture or social entrepreneur, if all you're doing is working outside of government, there's always going to be this barrier to scale, right? Because in this country, still the majority of dollars are still funneled through through government. And so there's got to be, love it or hate it, there's got to be a way for people that are trying to effect change to engage with government in an effective way. So the idea was just create a group, a team, a place where that kind of engagement, that deep engagement happens, and that is New York Mechanics. So our job then is to cast a very wide net on the left, and so innovators of all stripes and flavors can come in to us. What we're looking for explicitly, we're not looking for good ideas, we're looking for pitches. We're looking for people that can execute. These might be new approaches to solving old problems. They might be something old, rebranded, whatever it is. But these are pitches that have, if they work, the capacity to affect change in our communities, to leave a community better off for having had this intervention at their doorstep. Then our job becomes, in neuromechanics, as I said, or I think I said, or I should have said, that we essentially are a laboratory. So our job is not to talk about collaboration, it is to do the work. It's to roll up our sleeves and actually get some work done. I was going to use a different word there. And that's what the middle pipeline is. It is, how do we take these interesting people and approaches and thinking and turn them into experiments, things that we can actually try out in the world, right? So I think that one of the challenges that we face in government is the waterfall way of thinking, right? You know, give us a couple of years and a few $1 million and we'll solve whatever it is. And of course, neither of those things work. It usually goes over cost, over budget, over time, all those things. And almost always ends up having a lukewarm, if I'm being mean to my government collaborators, I apologize, but you know, I'm speaking from the heart. So, you know, and therein lies the challenge. Like that approach, that way of thinking is no longer up to scratch in terms of being able to deal with the problems I highlighted in the beginning. So instead, the approach that we've been, I think, pioneering and developing is to drive experiments, right? To try things in the world that will determine whether or not our residents or our partners will use these things even in principle. And I'll give you lots of examples following, so just stay with me for a moment. And then the idea is that if these things work, and these could be programs, products, services, whatever it is, our job, if these work, our job then is to scale them. You know, in the experimental phase, obviously, they're not done across the city. They'll be done in a few communities to test out the idea, kind of based on whatever the project is. But if it works, the idea is that we need to broaden it. We need to make it a regular operation within the city. And so that's sort of the last funnel there is looking at how do you scale them up. You notice that the line also goes down. We also try to fail fast. I think this is another characteristic that we face in government, that too often we think that when we stand up a program that it has to remain forever. So instead, we're trying to, by having these projects or these services driven by experiment, if they don't work, if they don't actually have impact, we shut them down, because we don't want to be in this place of constantly investing good money after bad, or bad after good, or whatever, however that works. So over the years, we've been doing neuromechanics now for 5 years. I think we're going strong. I think we're bigger than ever. And I think that we have definitely learned some lessons about what to do and what not to do. And so I've got, I think, 4 or 5 different sort of patterns or lessons as to how we have been able to think differently around the issue of collaboration. So the first one, empowering people to collaborate. Now this might sound bizarre, but one of the things that we've often found inside local government is it's not enough to simply say you need to be more collaborative or that we need to be more collaborative, because it just won't happen. It's like if I tell you we have to go out and be innovative, that leads to nothing. And so what we found is that instead we have to find ways to actually empower people to do that. And so it could be providing them access to resources, it could be providing them access to skills, or it could be simply giving them essentially a badge in a sense, or to kind of deputize them as being able to kind of meet with a very different set of partners to do the things that they're trying to pull off. So here's an example. I don't know if you can see this, maybe not. So I want to draw your attention to, I guess you can't, some of you may be able to see this, but the young woman there in the middle, her name is Catherine Lusk. She used to work with us a couple of years ago. She's since moved on, but she came to us from the Kennedy School of Government, and super smart, super energetic. And she had been given this brief, essentially, to rethink, and I'll talk more about this later, but to rethink the way in which we deliver services to the public, and to not simply put up a website, but rather how do we get in people's faces in a certain sense, in terms of being where they are and not expecting people to come to us. So what she did was to work very much outside of the silos, and so she worked inside the mayor's office, and what she built was this truck. So this is essentially a food truck dedicated to city services. Let's see if I've got it. I think, oh, sorry, I've got more pictures later on. But the idea here is that this truck will show up in your community and you can get a marriage certificate there, you can get a birth certificate there, you can pay your taxes there, you can get a dog license and so on. And so that was the idea. So you can barely make out, but there's sort of a placard on the side of the truck. Essentially it's a menu, and the tasty menu in this case are all those issues. So in order to pull that off, Catherine had to think very differently, because obviously this is not something she could go to the Public Works Department to make happen. So instead, she had to figure out, where do I get a truck? So this truck used to be the bomb squad truck of the Boston Police Department. She knew that she couldn't take this to the design shop because we don't have one. So instead, I think the early designs were her husband's. Her husband is a designer, but then we worked with a design firm, a regular design firm, to kind of scale it up and to make it more professional looking. And then she had to work then with the people that do constituent services to staff the truck. So this was a very stepping outside of the traditional way of a mayor's office of working. And then finally, making sure that what the truck was delivering is actually what people wanted to access. And so the most important collaborator here were the residents that were accessing the services, because this truck is irrelevant if people don't use it. And so she set in place a series of processes and approaches by which we could surface those issues. And so we were constantly looking as a way of learning about what our residents want from us in terms of services. This is another innovator, sort of an empowered collaborator. This is James Solomon. He has also since moved on. James was given the brief to, this one's a little more bizarre, but essentially the idea here is that in Boston, we, like every other city, face a crumbling infrastructure, like I said in the beginning. It's also pretty clear that we can't go about solving the problem of crumbling infrastructure using the standard kind of budget-driven approaches. There just isn't enough money. What we need to do is prioritize the fixes and then have that drive the longer-term capital investments. And so the question was, how do we gather that information in a real-time, up-to-date way, something that isn't we don't want to do an engineering study, that takes 3 months to do, and by the time we get the results back, it's already out of date. So instead, the idea was, how do we know, like right now, what is happening? So what James was given was a mobile phone app called Street Bump, and it runs on your phone. And as you drive around the city, and as you in the car and everything are bouncing up and down, the phone captures that data, and then we'll essentially do some analysis on it to determine when you've actually hit something that needs to be fixed. So in order to make that work, James is a public policy student from the Kennedy School. He was not a brilliant Google software engineer. In order to make this work, he had to work very closely with researchers in the greater Boston kind of research community, sort of Harvard and MIT and Boston University. He had to be working then with our public works teams to actually see how you would intersect the intelligence that this app is giving you into operations. How do you actually make it part of the work process? And then finally, we need to make sure that that this is something that our residents would actually use, because this could be, one way of thinking about this is a piece of creepy government technology that is hiding on your phone and then running in the background, and every now and then it's sending data off somewhere. So that couldn't be the way to think about this. And so instead, James had to spend a bunch of time, connecting with potential users to say, like, what would be useful? What would you actually do? And so again, connecting the dots across a wide variety of different collaborators. So the second lesson, learn to speak another language. So I'm not talking about Esperanto or Portuguese or something, but rather I'm talking about the fact that in our different institutional silos, we all speak different languages, right? We might be talking ultimately about the same thing, but we use very different words. We talk about impact differently. We talk about the problem differently. We talk about the communities differently. And so learning to put yourself in someone else's position is key, has been key for us. So here's an example of how we did this. So if you were a Boston Public School parent up until 2 years ago, this is what you had to read to figure out where you could send your kid to school. So not a good experience, right? And so this is all kinds of equity problems, as you can imagine. It's like the people that make it through this are going to be probably your more educated parents, probably people that have more time on their hands, and so it preferentially treats a certain group of people, and it was never intended to be that way. But we have basically a lottery system, or an algorithm-driven lottery system that can be complex to understand, and so we knew just from, again, sort of listening to what parents were telling us that we couldn't let this stand, and so we had to do something about this. So instead, we collaborated with with parents, and to understand what it is they would like to see change. And what they told us was, why can't I, instead of reading something, why can't it be like TripAdvisor or like Hotels.com, right? Experiences that I can trust in terms of, that they're fun to use and that they're much easier to understand. And so we built this website called Discover BPS with a group originally called Code for America. We've since sort of scaled it up a couple versions later. But the idea here, as I said, is to make it an experience that parents want to be part of, right? So rather than saying that, this is the only, you have to come here, and that if you want to register your kids, you have to come in and you have to jump through the hoops. Instead, we tried to put ourselves in a parent's perspective and say, so I am a parent, how do I want to be related to when I'm registering my kid for school? So something that's a little more elegant than we had seen previously. Another thing that we heard loud and clear from parents is that there are certain moments where you need different kinds of information. So this is an app that we built originally also with Code for America called Where's My School Bus? And it does exactly what you think it does. It tells you where your kid's school bus is. Now, this is not something that government could have, even in principle, on its own developed. Not because we couldn't do the technology, but because it wouldn't occur to us to do this. Because this is a piece of technology, this is a service that you don't use every day, right? You maybe use it 3 times out of the year. But for those 3 days out of the year when there's a snowstorm and there's whiteout conditions, you want to know where your kid is, and you want to know where the school bus is. And so we built that. We built this piece of technology with, around that particular use case, so where parents were the driving force in telling us what we should be delivering to them. So this was another great experience for us. And one of the things that has it's kind of surfaced for us, it changes the dynamic between us as an institution and parents in terms of their level of expectation for us. And so this is a tweet that we got from a parent during a school bus. So it says, thanks at Boston Schools for the Where's My School Bus feature. The bus is late. I think you can safely assume yet again is somewhere, although she doesn't say it. But I'm slightly less annoyed because I can track it live. Great idea. So this may not seem, like the feedback that's going to enable us to sort of radically change the school system, but this, I think, is radical. Because what it says to me is that we're changing people's expectations as to what we do. We're changing the trust relationship between our institution and everyday residents by focusing on their needs and bringing them into the process of design and not keeping them at arm's length as passive consumers. So this flows naturally into the next lesson, working to build trust. In this country, I'm not going to speak about Nashville because I'm sure you guys, love your local government. But I think in most parts of the country, at the local level, at the federal level, state, we have real trust issues. We no longer trust our government, and that's really bad. If we as at the beginning, if we are expecting at some level government to be part of the solution, we can't let it languish in the current state. We can't not trust our elected officials to do the right thing. And so we've been thinking a lot about this issue of trust. And so the way that we think about this is that, we can build trust by things like what I was talking about there with Where's My School Bus, by creating these moments that people want to engage in. And, collaboration, as a result, doesn't just happen because you tell people to do it. You need to give it a context. And I think building trust for an institution is a powerful place to start. And so this is a kind of a busy slide. I've never quite figured out how the right way to represent this. But what this shows is that over the last 4 or 5 years in Boston, we've been trying to explore how technology can be used. Because one of the things, again, that we hear from our residents is that they want better tools in their hands. They are interested in looking at how technology can be used to improve the resident experience. And so we've been developing a series of tools, all experiments, designed at listening to people and then responding and building experiments based on what they're telling us as a way of building trust, right? As a way of indicating that we're listening and we're trying to build these things and we want you to be part of the process. And so we developed a piece of technology a few years ago called Citizens Connect. Essentially, these things are pretty common now where you can see an issue and you report it to be fixed. And I think we did a good job in actually fixing those things so that it built up a lot of great momentum for us. And then we use that as a platform to explore a variety of different ways of thinking. So Street Bump came out of that way of thinking. There are things that didn't work, right? We were very interested in understanding if we created a text-based interface into the city, would people use it? Turns out no. It's a little bit too slow to kind of text in the level of information that we need. You as a resident, you can always text us, and we'll do our best to respond. But in terms of the automation here, it was a little bit too clunky, and we never quite were able to work. Another thing that we saw as we were watching how people use these tools was that often people report things into us that aren't even in our city. Boston is actually geographically pretty small. We're about 49 square miles, and people are often in other cities when they tell us we'll be in Cambridge or in Brookline and reporting things to us. And it's like, we can't fix Cambridge or Brookline as much as we might like to. So instead, we realized, again, that we can't not listen to that feedback, to that, what our residents are telling us. So we built a piece of technology called Commonwealth Connect that would work wherever you are in the Commonwealth. And so it would look at where you're reporting from. So if you are in Brookline, you would use the GPS to determine that and would then send that report to Brookline and not to us, assuming that Brookline wanted to play. So again, when we think about how do we collaborate with our residents, making sure that we're listening loud and clear and actually responding, and it's not just feedback, it's really enabling our residents to drive what we do next. So another lesson that we've learned is to think critically about your boundaries. And sometimes in the context of government innovation, we talk about what are the boundaries of government? What is that interface? I don't think there's any one answer. I think every community will have a different answer to that as far as where the different institutional boundaries lie. And so I think for us as a local government, it's important for us to realize that and then to find ways to kind of push those boundaries. And so we've done things like this. So this is a hackathon that we did around the reform of our permitting system. So Boston, along with many cities across this country, we have a broken permitting system. So you want to start a business, you want to put a roof deck or like a deck on your house or any kind of addition, the process by which you get a permit to do that is incredibly slow and arduous. And so instead of doing an RFP, we invited in a bunch of local hackers and community activists to come in and tell us what they thought the new permitting system should look like. And so we also ran a little contest around that to sort of solicit for creative ideas as to where this whole this whole framework around permitting should go. And so this was one of the winning teams. This is also very much the spirit behind City Hall to Go, the truck I was telling you about before. So that's Danielle, who runs the program. It is in some ways it's maybe retro, because everyone in the 21st century, everyone assumes that it should always be online. But when we listen to our residents, there's a lot of people that need to talk to somebody in order to get something done, and so we need to honor that. And I think that's actually incredibly useful because there are moments where you don't know if, did the email get sent, or your situation is complicated, that you need to talk to a person. And so making ourselves physically available and to collaborate directly with our residents in this way, I think has been illuminating for the entire organization. So there's another shot of the truck. I just like showing pictures of the truck because it's one of my favorites. And there's the menu. You won't be able to read that. It's a bit of an eye chart, but it's, you can pay a parking ticket, you can sign up for street cleaning alerts, you can get your dog license, and so on. So another lesson that we've learned is collaboration definitely needs a context, right? Finding reasons to work with one another is often very important. And so we've done things like, so this is a project that we ran called the Public Space Invitational, in which we were inviting artists to come and essentially take over different parts of the city. If you're an urban design geek, it would be called urban acupuncture. But the idea here is to get creatives out to rethink public space and let them decide what they want to see there, as opposed to us deciding. And so we got 72 responses back, which is great for us, because we thought we might get any, and they were all very high caliber. And we put in a little bit of funding to actually pay for building some of these things. So this is essentially an instrument that will resonate based on the level of the bay. And so there's one of them, interestingly, that is high enough that once climate change happens, at scale, and Boston is underwater, the last horn will ring. It's a little bit morbid, but it is art. This is one about humanizing City Hall, and so I don't know if you've ever been to Boston, but Boston has this crazy old kind of postmodern, or not even postmodern, a modernist. Kind of brutalist architecture. I should have given you a picture, but it looks like it's like a slab of granite in the middle of the city, and so very uninviting. It's a very cold experience. And so the idea was behind this project. This was an artist that came up with essentially a canvas wrap that would go on the ceiling of Boston City Hall that would make it look like it was the sky. And so you'd be looking up and say, "Hey, is the sky? Did they open the roof at the City Hall?" No, but but it looks great. This is another one. This is a small one, a simple one. The idea was that one of the entranceways into City Hall, very uninviting. So instead, we create the stairs of fabulousness, which are these sort of treatments that allow it makes it colorful. And I think in some ways, some of these things could be seen as trivial, but at the same time, our mayor is very serious about personalizing government and sort of reinforcing the idea that we are here for our residents. And so creating these moments, however small, I think are very useful signals to send that you're welcome here, and that we're trying to rethink how we connect with you and how we open our doors for people to be part of the process. This is another one. Essentially, it takes some street furniture. This is like a cabinet filled with electronics, that they're used to control the traffic lights and so on, and turns it into a bench so you can push it over and sit on it. This is going to be a hard one. Another, I think this is the last one, the last lesson, is the idea that sometimes collaboration is like spinach. That it's good for you, so you should just do it. You should just eat the spinach. But at the same time, I think there's it can be liberating working with very different partners. You can find sources of creativity, and this has been really important for our work as well. So this is a project that we did with a local sort of graduate student and artist. Her name is Sandra Richter. It's her there in the white pants. You can barely see it, but she's sitting on a contraption that she invented. This is a seat bench that is solar powered. So what that means is that you can plug your phone into it and it will charge your phone. And so it's a simple idea, but in order for that to work, she had to connect with these guys. This is our parks department, or some of our parks department. And so, having these folks, these three young women, working, with these guys, I think was a bit of a challenge, right? In terms of collaboration. How do you get students working with city employees? And what we found was that, if you'll notice, that there are some design changes here between that, which looks like art, and because it is art, and this is a little more pragmatic and a little more kind of functional. This was a combined design of Sandra and these guys, right, and the parks folks. And so I think we were able to get the best out of both groups, right? We were able to tap, Sandra's creativity, her team's creativity, as well as the creativity of these guys. And I think this is a group of people that are often overlooked. Another group of people that we don't do enough to engage with are our kids in communities. And so this was a project that we undertook to rather than, so Boston's going through the development of a transportation plan for the 21st century, because we've never really had one. And so instead of only coming up with this sort of this plan that would take years to develop, we also wanted to create these moments for communities to get together to think about what they think the plan should be, and to really use that as part of the input. And so here we realized that Lego is some of the greatest urban design tools that are out there. And so we put out a bunch of Legos for adults and kids, and they had at it. And so they were inventing their little their corner. This was I can't even think of the name of the corner now. Shame on me. But this was essentially rethinking the transportation infrastructure, so that there's sort of bike racks and so on that they're prototyping. This, in fact, this little girl, who you can barely see her hand, she actually went home to get her own Legos, but she didn't like ours. So when we think about like collaboration and connecting with people, it's a pretty powerful signal, I think. And again, people were prototyping with pen and paper. We also had a little bit of technology, so we were also printing out signs, letting the community decide what the signs would be, and have them put them up and have that sort of drive the discussion. So I think I've gone not that far over, but thanks very much. I look forward to questions, and again, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun being here. Right there. Yep.
My name is Dawn Eaton with the Family Center. You talked a lot about solutions to problems that you found in technology, and particularly mobile apps. And I was just curious about the diversity of your community and who uses, and has smartphones, because obviously most of them require a smartphone.
Sure. So when we went into this work, we assumed that there would be a big difference in terms of socioeconomic class and people that had smartphones. We found actually kind of the reverse. We found that, and this is counterintuitive, but a lot of the more struggling parts of the city have as many smartphones, if not more. There are many families that have multiple smartphones per child. Their parents may not have smartphones, but the technology is pretty diffuse. The question as to whether or not they have data plans is a question, and so I think it's not a question of the digital divide, or the same discussion of the digital divide that we used to have like 20 years ago. It's really about understanding the next level down, right, in terms of, because it's no longer can you connect with that family, it's who are you connecting with in that family, because you're connecting with someone. And so I think that being mindful of that is critically important.
Thank you. Hey, my name is Catherine. So were the stairs of fabulousness implemented?
They were. They are. Yep.
Did the mayor's office get a lot of angry letters about spending taxpayer money on them? I mean, I think they're quite fabulous.
So the artist that proposed the idea said it would make Boston City Hall 400% more fabulous. So more fabulous, which is a great number. So they were incredibly cost efficient. So in Boston, like in many cities, right, we have sort of a tiered procurement schedule, so that there are sort of chunks of money below which, sort of in the low thousands of dollars, that they're pretty easy to kind of get a hold of. And what we found is that there's basically nothing else that you can do for I think in this case it was about $3,500. There's really nothing else that we can spend that money on that would actually add value for the most part. It possesses a strange number. I think that the departments typically have much bigger budgets than that. And I think they do a good job of making sure they're covering their bases. But doing these small things to engage with people, I think people have been pretty excited about it.
Other questions for Nigel? Your side.
So how do you get people to take the risk? We talked
Sure.
about that earlier. I
Sure.
think it's something that you can't really push them into doing it. How do you pull them into doing it?
Sure. So the issue of how you manage risk, I think, is central to the question of innovation, obviously. And so what we found is that, again, sort of talking about the inside government context, In local government, we've just never had a way of managing risk. Essentially, that's what bureaucracy is, right? It is our way of slowing things down to a standstill. You pull off all the scary bits, and what you have left over, although doable, adds really no value, or very little value. I shouldn't say no value. And so I think that is the default risk management position. But it doesn't have to be that way. I think it is because we've never had this discussion about risk in local government that we've just kind of defaulted to thinking this way. I think that when the simple calculus that if we are expected to innovate, we need the ability to take on risk. I mean, I think that in every other sphere of our lives, we can accept that. But instead, in order to have that conversation, it is really a question then of like, how do you manage the risk? And in our case, the idea was to create this team, the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics, that essentially would be that risk. We call it a risk aggregator. So the use case would be you as a city official, maybe you're a middle manager in the public works department. You've got a new idea for how to use lasers to melt snow, for example, which is not a good idea, but that may almost assuredly will be outside of your usual line of business. But the idea is that New Urban Mechanics is the place where you can then come and explore the idea, which isn't to say that it'll actually get executed, because if it is a bad idea, we try to point you in a different direction. We're very open and collaborative and try to be positive about it. So we don't say no, but we always try to make the first answer yes. Yes, we will meet with you to talk about this idea. We would love to. So we also try to be the department of yes, but which doesn't mean that there isn't no shortly thereafter if it's a horrible idea. But I think like creating the context for these simple cultural things to encourage people to step forward, I think is really important. And so, having a way of managing risk. And in local government, I mean, one of the big elements of risk is if I engage in a project, what happens if it fails? Right? The press will get a hold of this, and then my good name is on the line. What we found is that by creating this place, this laboratory where you can try those things, it essentially is a safe place to try these things. And so if it fails, it isn't your fault, it's our fault. Or rather, it was an experiment being undertaken by New Urban Mechanics, and your name never shows up in the press. It would be our names show up. And so there's a strong communicative aspect here around risk in local government. So we spend a lot of time talking to the press around experiments that we're doing and the need to manage risk, and that's what this place is for, and they get it.
Nigel, do nonprofits also come to your office?
They do.
And do they get the first yes?
They do. Yep. And so we do quite a bit of work with nonprofits of all stripes and flavors. Very small social entrepreneurs to United Way, kind of big organizations, and it's the same calculus that we use there. The discipline of having someone frame what they're pitching in terms of an experiment is really useful, right? Because I mean, there is certainly a place for these big projects that cost a lot of money and that take a long time to implement. There are certain times we need to do that, but the challenge is we can't know which of those big heavyweight projects to invest in prior to experimenting, right? Because we've just never done that in local government. We've always had to use our crystal ball to determine, which bets to be placing in terms of which $500,000 investment, we need to be making. It's in no other sphere of our lives do we do that either. We always expect there to be some kind of a test to see if it will work even in principle, and then have that drive the downstream investment. So that's a big part of what we do.
Okay, Ruth, you get the last question.
What you're doing sounds incredible for the techie people, but having a chemistry background, I'm interested in the data.
Sure.
How are you measuring the
Outcomes.
effectiveness of
Yep.
this?
So
in the population?
Sure. So all of the experiments, they're not figuratively experiments, they're literally experiments. I mean, as close as we can get. So that at the outset, whenever we're going to do, so you come to us and you've got this pitch, right? Maybe there's something that we can do together around air quality or something. And so we run the experiment. At the outset, we have a hypothesis, right? What are we trying to get at? And what kinds of outcomes do we expect to see? We also try not, at the same time, to be overly prescriptive in those. There's in government a lot of times performance or innovation is tantamount to performance management, and sometimes that's appropriate, but sometimes not. Sometimes we need the flexibility to learn things in terms of these kinds of projects. And so we would set up, what are the success criteria, what are the expected outcomes, who does it help, under what conditions, and then we would then look to scale up that impact once we were to take that, assuming that it works. It might have failed miserably, but assuming that it worked, then we would know what kinds of impact in principle to expect once we had made it a regular service that the city delivers. Does that make sense?
I think that's all we have time for today. Let's give a big round of applause for Nigel.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to keep going, and then we'll have a break in about a half hour after this session. Nigel, that was terrific. I think Boston's way ahead of us in some kinds of technology that we don't even think about, so that was wonderful. I'm Louis Levine. I'm president of Center for Nonprofit Management. You saw me all over the program this morning. I wasn't there. And a quick apology. My wife and I were on a vacation on Friday, and we're hiking, and she went down and broke her ankle. And so she and I were at the surgeon's this morning, and she's going to have surgery tomorrow. So I'm in the position shortly of knowing what it's like to be a caregiver. So that's sort of my world. So I'm sorry I missed that. But I had to be here to introduce Blair, and so I came this afternoon, and then I'm going home right after this. Many of us, when we think of Memphis, we think, hey, we're Nashville. Okay.
You scared me where you were going.
And they're down there struggling, and we don't have anything to learn from them. And so why would we have somebody from Memphis? And I told Blair I was going to do this. But the fact of the matter is that in a number of ways, they're way ahead of us in terms of their philanthropic and nonprofit communities. Working with their business sector and to some degree their governments in coming together to solve problems. And they have problems down there, and they are working very well together to try to solve those problems. I got to know Blair Taylor when she was a member of the first class of Leadership Tennessee last year, which Lipscomb's heavily involved with. And I happened to mention offhand to her that we've been thinking about the term collective impact. And she said, without being arrogant or anything, she said, well, yeah, we've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. And I went, oops. And so at that point, I filed that away and said, if we ever have an opportunity, I'd like for her to come over. And so here she is. And in her humble way, she really didn't want to just get up and give a talk, so we agreed that we would do a little bit of a conversation. So I'll sit down in a minute and we'll have a conversation, which will be mostly her. But Blair Taylor is the CEO of Memphis Tomorrow, which is right in the middle of everything that is going on in the city and county of Memphis and Shelby County. Also, they have a subsidiary, and you have some information in front of you on the tables about Memphis Fast Forward. And so I'd like to start, and then I'll sit down. I'd like to start by asking Blair to talk a little bit quickly about what is Memphis Tomorrow and what is Memphis Fast Forward.
Thanks, Louis. You guys hear me okay? Yes. It's funny, Nigel, when you talked about sometimes we feel like collaboration is spinach, and we ought to take our medicine, and there's a little bit of a grind to it. I think you're right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how some of that grind can somehow be productive, because I think many of you in this room as nonprofits really do get that collaboration is very difficult. If it were easy, we wouldn't all be here at Collaboration College trying to figure it out and how to work together more productively. So, Memphis Tomorrow, what is it? What was your question again?
What is it?
Memphis Tomorrow is an association of CEOs of many of our biggest companies in Memphis, and they formed back in 2001 with the idea being that it's important for the civic life of our community that business leadership really engage meaningfully at the community problem-solving table, and that they bring the resources of their companies to bear on setting direction and supporting progress in the community. So I am the president of that organization. We're very leanly staffed. It's me and an assistant. And I've been with them since they started back in 2002. So that's Memphis Tomorrow. The initiative Memphis Fast Forward, which Louis mentioned, and I saw there's something on your tables here. referencing Memphis Fast Forward, this is really the vehicle through which we have engaged in collective impact for the past, well, really since 2006. And before we knew that we were doing collective impact, which we really only realized when Mark Kramer and John Kania came out with that great piece a couple of years ago in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. You all, I think earlier this morning, had some discussion around that and the 5 conditions of collective impact. Probably like a lot of you, for us, that was really an epiphany, and it gave language to a lot of what we realized we were already doing. And in fact, what we used to say we were doing, we started in 2006, we said, look, you know, we're business leaders, we want to affect change, we want to do things, we know grass tops leadership is important, but frankly, we don't know how to solve these problems, and what we really need to do is talk to a lot of people that do know how to solve these problems, who are the experts, who are the practitioners, who are people in the field every day, and others who are in multiple sectors who have resources to bring to bear on these problems. Memphis Fast Forward, then we sat down with both of our mayors, and we do have 2 mayors in Memphis and Shelby County. We have a city mayor and a county mayor. We're not consolidated like Nashville-Davidson. We sat down with our 2 mayors at the time, and we said, you know, do we have a strategic plan for the community? Does one exist, you know, like we do in our businesses with goals and strategies and tactics and priorities and all of that, and metrics and accountabilities? And they said, no, you know, but you know, we do need one, and would you all help with that? And we said, okay, you know, we'll help with that, but it's got to be a partnership. It's got to be a public-private partnership, and we'll sort of play co-conveners with you all. We'll bring resources to the table. We'll help draw the practitioners in the arenas that we feel like we want to affect change in. And so that was the birth of Memphis Fast Forward back in 2006. And it has 5 focus areas. There's an education and talent, crime and public safety, economic development, health and wellness, and then something we call government fiscal strength. And it's been an evolving vehicle, but it's a pretty massive vehicle at this point, which is structured as a series of collaboratives that have an interlocking nature to them. And so in each one of those 4 areas, if you will, think about a round table of 50 or so leaders around the table, a Cradle to Career initiative. For example, we call it People First Partnership. We have leaders of all facets of education, from early childhood education to K-12 education to post-secondary. There are business leaders at the table. There are government leaders. Our mayors are at the table. There are leaders of what we call our Early Success Coalition. They're nonprofit folks. They're faith leaders. And these folks, basically these tables are the forum that have been created for us to plan and set agendas collectively as a community around that issue. And there is a strategic planning component of each one of them that's refreshed every 2 or 3 years. And while there's this grass tops leadership table, the bulk of the recommendations and the work and the agenda setting really comes from the expertise of nonprofit organizations, practitioners in the field, educators, et cetera. So if you will, just picture in each one of those 4 focus areas I mentioned, we have one of these round tables that does this regular strategic planning, and each one of them is supported by what we call a backbone organization in the terms of collective impact. So that's the structure of it. It's a little complex to picture, but it's just picture 4 big round tables that meet regularly and have a common agenda, which they've set together, and through conversation, active conversation with the community of practitioners in that area. So that's Memphis Fast Forward. And I think what you all hoped that I might do today is...
Yeah, we'll all hit it.
Yeah, you hit, yeah.
Okay, now it becomes a conversation again.
Yeah,
Okay.
good, okay.
So what Blair was about to say was that we've asked her for a couple of examples, actually substantive examples, and she played around with all 5 of those areas, and I think has come up with a couple, and again, you've got some information about them. But what I'd like you to do is talk about each one, and specifically about the outcomes. We had a question, in the last program about outcomes. and you've got some.
Yeah.
So first, let's start with the Family Safety Center.
Okay, that's great. Well, and one of the things that Lewis had asked in thinking about these examples was to really use examples where we had multiple sectors involved, so government, nonprofit leadership, and where in fact there were a lot of nonprofit partners who had come together around a particular issue to collaborate in new and different ways to make progress on the issue. So with the Family Safety Center, this is today, it is a one-stop shop for providing all kinds of services for domestic violence victims. There are 40-plus agencies involved, many of whom are actually co-located at the Family Safety Center, others who are part of the center through MOU arrangements and who actively are serving the clientele of the Family Safety Center in a variety of ways. So that's what it is. It started out in 2006 as just an idea. In fact, it was an idea that was sort of hatched by our DA at the time. Our DA had data on a growing domestic violence problem, and together with a small team of nonprofits who were interested in the issue, were looking for solutions, and they found one. What they essentially did in terms of outcomes and where we are now, and that was back in 2006. They have now officially launched the Family Safety Center in Memphis. It has a permanent location. It is now a 501c3 organization. As I said, there are 42 agencies participating actively with formal memorandums of understanding in terms of the roles that they play and how they service the particular clients coming through. They have multiple funding streams, which for many of you in this room understand what a challenge that is. There's huge private sector support at this point. There's state level support and there's local government support for this. It was embraced by what's called Operation Safe Community, which if you'll think back about those big roundtables and the strategic planning that's happening, the one on public safety and crime reduction, that plan and that effort really embraced the Family Safety Center and said, let's support it, let's bring resources to bear, let's help pilot it, incubate it, give it what it needs to be tested, and then later really brought to life and made into a fully functioning operational center. Then after some years of success and sort of growing expansion of the vision and enthusiasm around this idea, it was successfully incubated. It was then adopted into the governor's public safety plan. And they're, in fact, recently, they're expanding family safety centers across Tennessee, and they're launching some family safety centers. And there's one that has been launched here in Nashville, I think, very recently, maybe something, the Jean Barlow Advocacy Center or something like that. Jean Crow, okay, Advocacy Center. And, you know, I struggle, as does this group struggles with, okay, now how do we get these, those are process outcomes, right? So what about the real outcomes, what we're trying to affect in terms of, you know, not only reducing domestic violence, but really helping victims move on to more productive lives and their families move on to more productive lives. What about those outcomes? Repeat domestic violence offenses is one of the outcomes we're seeking to try to reduce. And so, long story short, a good part of the work over the past year with all of these nonprofit partners has really been centered on, okay, what specifically are the outcomes that we want to affect together? So it's this shared vision and then this shared set of outcomes. They've been developing and working on what are those shared set of outcomes. And this is not an easy task to get a bunch of nonprofit partners together in a room and say, okay, what are all the key metrics that we want to be held accountable for, that we want to hold ourselves accountable for, and what are the process outcomes and who has what piece of it. So they've developed this set of outcomes collectively, and they have memorandums of understanding, and now they are building in and here's where technology comes into play. They have built and established a new this has actually been a broader community-wide process, but they've been a part of building a new case management system, a new fairly high-tech case management client tracking system that doesn't just allow them to sort of say, okay, here's what our clients have done and here's the services we've provided. It allows for that, but it also says, okay, what have the impacts been of these clients? We all know that oftentimes many of the clients are shared clients of many of the same agencies. And so this, I can't say enough about how this sort of central tracking system we think is going to be really instrumental in being able to help us collect system-wide data, because ultimately what we're trying to do here is create seamless system of services, right, for these clients, so that we can identify where there are gaps, but so that we can also ensure that these clients really are getting the services that they need, and frankly that we're using our resources most efficiently in the community. So I'm very excited about that piece of it. I do think that's central to the effective work of collaboratives. There's the 5 conditions of collective impact, just refresher on them. One is shared vision and mission. This group accomplished that, and they sort of built it from the beginning. Few started the vision, and they began to get others on board with it. They then became part of the Operation Safe Community Plan, now part of the state plan, so they've expanded folks who've bought into the vision. Shared measurement. I explained to you how they've been working diligently on that, and that has been, they've had a lot of support. They've had consultants to come in and work with them and support them in building that shared measurement. So a little nod to the consultants in the room. Mutually reinforcing activities, right? That's that's the 3rd condition of collective impact, and it's sort of, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're not all out here operating in silos and just doing our own thing. It means we're actually communicating, and we have first these MOUs where we understand each role that everybody is playing as part of the continuum of services for the clients, and then hopefully ultimately we have this shared client tracking system and case management system where we can really understand and be in communication with each other about how we're servicing each of the clients. And then there was a backbone organization, which has been critical. You can't, I think we've all discovered it's very difficult to sort of just be a collaborative of partners. You all sit in a room and you have great committee time and great ideas and planning, and then you leave, and whose day job is it to really help move the work forward and sort of corral everybody. So that backbone organization is important. We've had that in the incubator setting with this Family Safety Center, and now with the 501c3 structure it's staffed to provide that backbone for all the different multiple agencies. So I think that's some of the mechanics of an example that worked.
Awesome. And it's interesting, some of the language that we have been using around collaborations and collective impact, we're hearing it all from you, and it's really helpful. Again, you are ahead of us a little bit on that, so we appreciate it. All right, so number 2, among the various things that you all are doing, we decided it'd be helpful to hear about the Early Success Coalition.
Okay. So the Early Success Coalition, again, I looked for an example with multiple nonprofit partners really engaging and trying to move the needle on common metrics. This is a coalition of 80-plus agencies, if you will, who all serve in some way or another children ages from birth to age 8 and their families. So they're providing a full array of services among all those partners. They're government partners, they're nonprofit partners, community-based organizations, some grassroots agencies, some parent groups, all of whom are a part of this coalition. Similar story, except for the fact that here there's not a one-stop shop that's become the kind of staffed backbone organization. There's still just a group of partners all doing their own thing. One of the agencies, which is a hospital, their Center for Children and Families, has stepped up to be the backbone organization. That's Methodist of Honor Center for Children and Families. What they have managed to do, they have their goals are healthier births, reducing abuse and neglect, child abuse and neglect, improving school readiness, improved academic attainment through grade 3. So all these agencies are in some way working towards one of those goals and efforts. Again, many of these metrics are process metrics or process outcomes, but we can't discount that because a lot of this work that we're doing is difficult work. It doesn't get changed and fixed overnight, and so it's really important for all of us to recognize the importance of process outcomes on our journey towards the ultimate outcomes that we want to see. They have, like the Family Safety Center, they have established this participation and governance structure. I was reading it on the way over here from Memphis. It's this 2-page document that's very sort of detailed about participation levels, and it's reflected in the memorandums of understanding that they all sign, again, to be a part of this coalition. What does that mean? What role do they play? One of the things that they sign up to do, they likewise are sharing this new, and have helped build, actually through a grant, this new client case management tracking system. This group feels also that that will be game-changing for their ability to work more seamlessly together for the clients and to really be able to share important information about the client's growth and progress and development, and be able to figure out who may be falling through the cracks, who's not falling through the cracks, et cetera. They have, you know, one of the things that they've done very well, they have all agreed to collectively come together to apply for big federal grants, state monies, so that they've kind of signed off on the compact of, look, let's not go do this individually and compete with each other when these kind of big opportunities come down the pike. They've actually signed off in their MOUs that they'll participate and sort of play ball with the group to figure out what's the best package to bring in more funds, who would play what role in it, and they've been very successful. They brought in about 3 years, they brought in over $11 million in additional funds, which has been huge. They have also, I think, set the stage for sustainability, where they've really become the city's go-to sort of entity on if you want to kind of have an agenda around early childhood, you want to figure out how you can support it, where philanthropists go, where government goes to look, what should we be doing to better strengthen our kind of early childhood health and wellness and education readiness. This is the sort of become the go-to group, and I think that's, again, the real value, one of the real values of being a solid collaborative. So that's sort of the nature of the outcomes that we have there. It's a pretty amazing group of people and group of agencies, and again, I think outcomes tracking, they have this very sophisticated outcomes framework that they've developed, and they too they have a lot of good individual agency outcomes data, but they're working now on packaging what is the full sort of outcomes landscape looks like through all of our work together.
I want to say to Blair that the folks who just left are not Nashvillians being rude to Memphis. They're actually the consultants getting ready for the next round.
Gotcha.
So that's what that's about. You mentioned that you're in this for the long haul, but politicians especially, and the rest of us as well, like short-term solutions. How do you walk that tightrope?
I think that's a great question, and you know, you're right. Particularly politicians, not only like short-term outcomes, but they like credit. And part of the collaboration game is trying to sort of push down the need to take credit as an individual agency and being kind of letting that be kind of yield, if you will, to the credit of the collaborative. So you got to continue to give credit to the politicians and you need to be mindful of and I say you, so what does that look like? So with the Family Safety Center, for example, because this Operation Safe Community big roundtable group of leaders has recognized and sort of owned, if you will, Family Safety Center, one of its key initiatives, it works on PR for the agency. It actually supports getting the word out about the good work of the different partners who've been participating. So credit and getting information out there about the good work that's being done is important. And frankly, with a lot of our politicians, mayors, in fairness, they do. They have to show and prove what they're doing and where they. So we ask them to play sort of champion roles and to sign on where they have areas of passion. And with Family Safety Center, for example, our DA, who is now our state commissioner for Safety and Public Safety and Homeland Security, Bill Gibbons, has been a real champion of this. Our sheriff, now mayor, now county mayor, has been a real champion of this. It was genuine from the start, and then we've given them roles and asked things of them so that they can take credit, but legitimately so, for the
Great.
work.
That's good, thank you. Let's have a couple of 3 questions, and then I think that's all the time that we've got. Questions? Yes.
Hi, this sounds wonderful. My question is there like one central leader of, say, you have the 80+ agencies for the Early Success Coalition? I know you talked about there's a backbone, but is there like an executive director over all of them? Or?
Yes, the way that they've designed it, they have a leadership group that's been elected by the group. So I think there's maybe 10 of them who are part of the leadership group. The staff is provided. There are 2 staff people who are kind of administrators of the group that are provided by the Le Bonheur Center for Children and Families. And then there is, through some grant funds, they have paid for a period of time a consulting firm called Consilience Group, which really is a rock star in this arena in terms of collective impact and collaboration and systems design. That entity, there are about 3 of them that are part of that consulting team who've been a part of the work of helping build the infrastructure and support the collaborative system.
Other questions?
What do you see personally? What do you see as the pros and cons of one of the backbone actually being one of the primary service providers as well?
That's a great question. I think ideally it's not. Ideally, you have a neutral backbone organization that is non-service providing, and for the most part, interestingly, in these 2 examples, it's not the case, but for the most part, in our models, it's a neutral, non-service providing intermediary.
Can I ask a follow-up? So for agencies that are interested in forming a collaborative and it's a fledgling collaboration, and they're not at that point where they can have that independent backbone. Do you have any recommendations for that?
I think absolutely. I think you establish a leadership, sort of team within the collaborative, depending on how large it is. It could just be the collaborative itself, 6 or 10 agencies. And then I highly recommend you get a consulting firm to come in and help you sort of design your systems and think about what your needs are going forward from a staffing perspective. And then if there are appropriate agencies, you look for what you got, and if something could be workable, otherwise you start something new.
That leads to the question, if you're doing collective impact, how rigorous do you have to be in these 5, whatever they are, areas of collective impact that you're supposed to have? Do you have to be perfect or not really?
You don't have to be perfect, for sure. There's a great organization out there, probably many of you have heard of it, Strive. They have a very, very prescribed methodology for what collective impact does, and we've learned a lot from them and kind of how it functions and what's pure collective impact and what's not. I think that a lot of it is very much do it yourself and kind of figure out. I think these are very good guidelines. I think a backbone organization, I think the shared vision, the shared measures and outcome, and this sort of continuous communication and mutually reinforcing activities are all very, very critical to the work. But I don't know that you need to be really prescriptive about exactly what that looks like in each one.
Well, Strive is out of Cincinnati, and they're kind of the foremost collective impact operation in the country, I guess. Blair, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was really
Hope it was helpful.
I just want to close by saying that that collective impact is one part of Collaboration College, and what we hope is that there may well come 1 or 2 or 3 collective impact models out of this. But frankly, we're looking for all kinds of collaborations, and I think the 2 sessions that we've just heard kind of stretch our minds a little bit and give us some ideas about things that could be.
All right, that was the 7th inning stretch, but the game's not over yet. So if we can reconvene here. Once again, tremendous thanks to the Lipscomb cheerleading squad we had today and the exercise break, and Dean Charlotte Long for keeping us on track. So now we're moving a little bit from theory to thinking about application and thinking about kind of what comes next after your engines have been running, and thinking about all the potential ideas and all the potential collaborations or collective impact models that you would like to see in Nashville 5 to 10 years from now. So to do that, we're going to bring in what I think was a difference maker in Collaboration College 1.0, which is the business consultants. With which, just anytime you're a nonprofit, and I run a little nonprofit at HCA for employees, so it's always helpful for me to get different perspectives on our work. And that's what comes with the consultants that we have assembled for you today that actually brought in your popcorn and hats. But to lead the consultants are Karen Thompson from HCA, who you met this morning. Woohoo! Let's hear it for Karen. And Rebecca Munn from North Highland. So let's hear it from North Highland. Incredible, talented team of 2 to lead the larger team of consultants. So take it away and take us home.
Oh, I'm going to take that mic too.
You can take the mic.
Okay, good afternoon, thank you. First, I'd like to have the other consultants, both from HCA, North Highland, and C3 stand. Again, you saw them as they were handing things out, so look across the room, in the corner, all the way around. These will be folks that, should you decide to continue on with this, you will be matched up with them. All of them great folks I've worked with. I think collectively we work with everyone there. I think as Joanne had mentioned earlier, we do use both ourselves as well as our other partners, North Highland and C3, quite a bit on various activities throughout HCA. They're involved in a lot of other initiatives in the community and do a good deal of volunteering. And so they've been excellent partners with us on this particular effort. So let me just orient you quickly to what's on your table. You will have a handout that lists all the names of the participants who are here, and it looks like this. So start looking at that as you go through. There may be just 1 or 2 on your table, so if you would take that and look. And that is just a good guide to who else is here. So in a few minutes, what we're going to do is give you a chance to kind of break up. And as Joanne mentioned, you've had a chance to listen and ask some questions. But after we go through a little bit of the background of the program, what you're going to do is you're going to be able to break out into 4 corners around the room to start to actually talk about the particular collaboratives or civic impact that you may be interested in. And so before we get there, we want to just kind of give you some handouts. Again, this list here are the folks who are in the room. So if you haven't had a chance to meet them, you say, oops, wait a minute, I want to talk to someone that's working at Mercy or some other organization. Look on that list and you may want to keep an eye out for them. And we'll do some introductions when you break out, but just wanted to orient you to that. Also, what you have on your list, on your tables, if I could talk, too much stretching, I think, is the collaboration readiness assessment, which Rebecca will walk you through in a minute, and that's just a little checklist that'll be helpful to you. Walking in right now, I'll call him out, is Bill Wright. He's one of the other volunteers, consultants, who really, Bill has a special way of doing his hair, so he wasn't able to wear the hat because of product, but later he may put it on for you. But right now, it's just something that didn't work for him, so he chose to come in late. I will call you out if you're late. Hey, Bill. And then also in your program booklet, if you turn to page 20, you can kind of follow along with me. That's the schedule. And I actually want to walk you through the schedule. Would you mind flipping through that for me? Oh, next this. No. That, yeah, flip to the next slide. Oh, the up. Yeah, okay. So I want to actually walk you through the schedule. Again, it's on page 20 and 21 in your program booklets as well. That's something you're probably going to want to reference quite a bit as the next few months. But I want to just walk you through what's going to happen after today. So yes, we started with the 101. Really, this is the kickoff. And you started hearing about best practices and case studies. This is a good reference to kind of prime your thinking. Then from there, what we're going to do is we've already had the consultants, which you've met here, but this is a chance for you to start actually thinking more specifically about, wow, I came in with an idea possibly, but now what next? What does it actually look like? So over the next month or so, you're going to have a chance to start really kind of refining that idea, developing it in preparation for submitting your proposal. So on November 19th, there'll be Collaborative Connections, and that'll be with Baptist Healing Trust. Again, it's an optional event, but it's a chance for you to kind of come again and reconnect and start to explore that idea and the concept that you might have actually had. I see Kathy with a hat on, which threw me. She is really into it. Yep. But that's another chance, again, when you go away today, it's important to actually make sure you still stay connected and start talking amongst other people to see, you know what, here's my concept, can I talk with someone else and maybe flesh it out a little bit more, so you have a chance to do that. And then in January, we're going to have coaching calls, and with all the folks that stood up, that's your opportunity to actually call in and start sharing some ideas that you have and help us work with you to refine that and say, hey, I've got a opportunity I'm thinking of. We've got a few agencies together. We've got a private organization as well. We're not quite sure if that would be a good proposal. This will be your chance to actually get some feedback before you actually submit this proposal. So we'll be scheduling those calls for you to talk with us, and we'll have a chance to kind of help you refine that before you submit the proposal, which will be due February 11th. Remember that. When's the proposal due? There you go. All right. Key date, again, February 11th there. And then we'll go through reviewing those with the planning committee, which you've met throughout the day. March 2nd, we'll go ahead and do the announcement of that. And then Collaboration 201. That's with all the teams that have been selected. They're actually going to have a chance to participate, and that's when we actually start getting much more focused, because now you've identified the collaboration that you're looking at, your partners are together, and that's when we actually start getting into the skill building and start looking at the competencies that are involved in having a successful collaboration, okay? That's where the work begins. And then for the next few months, from March up until June 2nd, you're going to be working with the consultants. You'll be having periodic meetings. The consultants will work with you to help you identify if there's some other specific needs. You may need some strategic planning. You may need someone that will help you look at your staffing models. All the things you started to hear earlier from the other organizations, that's your chance to work with a consultant, and they will help you do that. We're going to talk about roles and responsibilities in a minute, but you're going to be working with them over the course of those few months. And then June 2nd, you heard the team that did not win officially, but I still contend that they won in other ways. Not the money, but again, it's about the sustainability of a great idea. That mock review and presentation, and that's June 2nd. And that's really your dry run of actually giving that presentation. And it's not just about the presentation per se, but it's also about, is that a compelling idea? Because you've been working on that for a while, but now you have an objective set of panelists that are actually there to hear it fresh, that haven't been involved with you, to say, wow, Greg, I thought that sounded like a great concept. Have you thought about the training? How are you going to be able to sustain that model? Does that really make sense given two other organizations are already doing that? Is that really meeting the community need? It sounds like it could, but you might want to tweak that some more. And so, not calling Greg out, but you did give us that woo-hoo, and so we appreciate that. And another one, yes! Okay, this is good. It doesn't get you extra points, though. Sorry, all right. Do it out of the kindness of your heart. So you'll have a chance, again, get that feedback, and then you're going to go back for the next couple of months and just refine that. Make sure, have you got all your staff involved? I think from the team that won, what you also heard was they used that time to really make sure that they were actually starting then. They weren't waiting for the contest, so to speak, to present that to say we won. We're saying, you know what, if this is something we want to put in place, well, we need to train folks. We need to get orientation together. We need to make sure we've worked out all these issues of, oops, wait a minute, Rebecca's looking at me cross-eyed. Oh, I know, when she does that, I went too far. Or I just insulted Bill because of the product that he wears in his hair. And so I actually have to, again, for illustrative purposes, Bill doesn't like it when I call him out, so I won't do that anymore. But that's when you work through all of the things. Again, when you just decide, hey, I want to date this person, so you're dating. You've been dating for a few months, and you decide you want to get more serious. When you get more serious, what do? Then you actually start working on the relationship. That's what you need to do. Not work on the presentation, work on those relationships. The things that are going to sustain you once this program is all done and Collaboration College 2.0 is over. Do you have sustainable relationships that will make that program a success? So that the next time we do this, that whether you won the money or not, that you're here on the panel. and that you're going around talking to other people, and you are the model that others are looking to say, that's a great program, wow, I'd like to do that. So that's really what we're looking for. So think about that. Again, that's the end game, not just a presentation, but the program you put in place. And then the final presentations are going to be due September 1st, and graduation is the 11th. And then the announcement is going to be October 22nd, just as we've done before, with the Salute to Excellence from CNM. So that's the timeline quick, and I want to talk quickly because I want to make sure you have time to actually talk amongst yourselves. And so the next slide is the roles and responsibilities. We talked about that, and I want to be real clear on the consultants. They're going to help you with facilitated sessions if you need that. But again, what we've said with them is these are all folks who are very seasoned and experienced and have different backgrounds, but all have been doing consulting in their respective organizations. Some have also contributed to nonprofits. They've been on boards. So they're very seasoned, but they also have expertise and access to other consultants. So as they're working with you, if you have needs that they don't have, they can tap into other resources within our respective companies or at CNM. So don't just look and say, wow, I don't know if I want to raise that issue with them because they don't know much about back office operations. Well, between us, we have people who do that for a living, and we can help bring in experts that will help you work through those concepts. So again, look at it as these two folks that are in front of you that are your team of consultants. They're also the front face to many other resources that are going to be put at your disposal pro bono. Okay, that's the commitment that all three of us have made, agencies have made to this program because we believe in it. So that's there. But there is a cap. Now, these folks are not going to be doing your PowerPoints. They're not going to be scheduling meetings. They're not going to be taking notes. They're there for the expertise that you have. And they have up to 50 hours.
And we're volunteering our time.
Yes. That is important. So it's up to 50 hours over the course of this that they'll be volunteering their time with your respective collaborations. The agency lead, and so of the teams that are involved in this, it's important for you to pick a lead person. And you heard Michael say that that was him, and from not just the fiduciary, but this is the point of contact that's going to be working with the consultants to make sure they're getting meetings scheduled. That's a lead. If CNM or others have questions, there's got to be that one point person that's the lead for all of this for a coordination effort. And that'll be important. You can see there again, contact person helping to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing and they're aware of the dates. And then the team members. It's important to make sure, besides who's just standing up presenting, that you have the right combination of folks that are involved on that team to actually, again, as we talked about, develop that proposal. And so you've got to make sure you've got a nice balance of perspectives from each one of the organizations that are involved. So again, those are roles and responsibilities. Let me just stop and say, questions about that? Because that's where last time there were a couple of teams that had more challenges because they had more of a rotating agency lead. Can't have rotating, got to have one. You know, it's nice to say, we want to collaborate, and so that means we're going to share it. No, we need to have one person who's taking point. It's just going to make it so much more seamless. So that's important. Okay. And I will turn it over to Rebecca, who will talk you through the readiness inventory.
Okay, so one of the things we did after 1.0 was we took feedback from all of the groups that participated, said what worked well, what do we need to improve, and then took feedback from all the consultants. So one of, like good consultants, we decided we needed a tool, and a tool to help you decide, are you ready to collaborate in whatever form you want. As Karen said, there are 4 different areas at each corner of this room that you can break out into and go meet some folks to talk about collaborations. But on your readiness inventory, there's 6 areas. The first one is kind of the why, the motivation, right? Is your kind of outcome, expected outcome aligned, things like that. The timing, is the timing right? Do you have other really large initiatives going on in your agency today that will prohibit you from really applying the right amount of time? Do you have the right resources? And so those are resources on your leadership team. They're resources also at the board level, right? Is your board committed and willing to participate? That's very important. Financial position. Are you in a position to be able to offer up this time and any resources needed to participate in this process? And lastly, the organizational capacity. You can read through those details. But there's a skill set need sometimes, and as Karen said, the consultants are here to fill some of that in. But think sustainability, right? Do you have the organizational capacity? And if you don't, where can you get that from? So this is a tool for you. This is the beginning, so don't think that you have to leave here and fill this out today and be ready, right? We just wanted to provide the tool. You can take it with you. It's on your table. And I think now we're ready to...
So before you break up, if I can ask the consultants to kind of go to your respective corners there, and you'll see over the left, the joint administrative or back office operations, and that'll be Gwen and Andrew, and there'll be some other folks joining them over there. In the far left-hand corner over there, my left, sorry, the collective impact, and tomorrow, Tony, and there'll be some others that'll join them back at that corner. Oh, question? Yes? Excuse me, if you could send a list?
You need more of these?
Oh, yeah, do we have more of the attendee list to hand out? We'll get some to you, okay? If you could just circulate it on your team, on your table, but we'll get you some more as well, okay? In that back corner there, that's if you're not quite sure and you don't see the collective impact, the joint administrative, or the joint program and advocacy, it's something else, I'm not sure. If you would just go into that corner, and then Anna and John and other consultants will be back there in that corner for you. And again, this is your chance to just start talking amongst yourselves within those respective areas of focus. And if you may have come in and you already have a partnership, and you've got a set idea of what you want to do, well, then you can go out the door to your right, around the corner, and there's a collaboratory. I think I said it right. So I love the name, Collaboratory, at the Andrews Institute, and coffee back there. And you can actually just kind of talk back there if you already have an idea and you've got the partners and you just want to say, hey guys, given what we heard, has anything changed? You can go to the right outside. Otherwise, we just asked you to go to those respective areas. And so in terms of the rest of the day, if you will, we still have kind of keeping our promise of saying 3:30, we will end on time. And so we just ask to use the next probably 40 minutes or so to talk, and then we won't have a formal closure. This is the closure. So I want to say on behalf of everyone, we appreciate you coming. We thank you for considering participating in Collaboration College 2.0. I want to thank Lipscomb for doing a fantastic job of hosting us. Excellent. And C&M, and Caitlin Nossett, who has done a fantastic job on helping pulling this together. She's been the one that's helped coordinate with Lipscomb around all of this. As well as the speakers, most have left, but the speakers, if any of them are still here throughout the morning, that have done a great job on just sharing their experiences. And so I want to stop talking, but thank you all for coming and giving so much time to start to explore a collaboration. So good luck with the process. If you have questions that aren't able to answer it in your team, if you would just give your name and the question to the consultant, and we'll take that back and get that answered for you and follow back up with you. So with that, Joanne?
Karen, we'll be emailing the list of participants out to everybody.
Okay, so that list will be emailed out to everyone. So again, there's one on each one of the tables, but you'll have something in email, okay? Any other questions before you just go to the, I feel like go to your corner? Yeah, okay, all right, but go to your respective corners, and thank you.